Hello everyone, I hope you're all enjoying this holiday season. I know it's been keeping me a bit too busy with family obligations to put any videos up, but I'm happy to say that I've still been able to get some game time in. In particular, I've been playing a lot of the Darkfog update on the Dyson Sphere program. And as I've been playing it, I've answered some questions that I had regarding on how the fog works and what you can do to defend yourself initially. So I wanted to share a couple of the quirks that I found that can make controlling the fog easier initially, and what will trigger the dark fog attacks from the hive. By the way, I'm going to take a moment to mention that I realize my construction is not the most optimal of setups. I have been trying to rush through a lot of things while messing around with the dark fog, so the main concern really is to make forward progress. It is not to make the most efficient base anywhere, so please pardon the spaghetti. So initially, when you start the game with Darkfog on, you're going to notice a couple of threat meters. There's a threat meter for the hive, and there's a numbered hive base threat meter as well. This is pretty self-explanatory, but do note that there's a level of the hive or base written down, as well as the overall threat. Once the threat reaches 100%, you can expect an attack. The hive threats will come from space and will be sort of space to ground attacks generally, and the base attacks will be ground to ground. Keep that in mind because it's important. Anyways, one of the first things that you used to want to do prior to the dark fog showing up was expand to the other planets in order to get access to titanium and silicon. Doing this is slightly complicated now by the fact that the hive will have several bases on the other true starter planets. Not to mention, it's going to continue to try placing bases on your starter planet as well as the other planets as you destroy them, if you are destroyed. I found that for me, taking an aggressive approach initially was very helpful because I found a way of effectively shutting down the hive advance without getting more threat from it. What I was initially doing was creeping up on the base on the starter planet using a belt of copper ammo, about 6 turrets and a repair base. The fog will send out its troops to attack you once you are close enough, and what you need to do is get some turrets in close enough to it so that they can start taking out the turrets and factories that are around the base. Once you destroy that base entirely, it's going to leave a hole behind, and you can either fill it up with a bunch of foundations, which basically covers it up, or you can, even better, you can put in a thermal power plant on the hole and you can reap the benefit of that. They are very nice, very effective. I think I had one that was giving me 300% power from one of those vents. There's a slightly different approach that you can take, but depending on your playstyle, this may or may not be something you want to do, because this will basically shut down the fog so that it no longer expands on that planet. Once you destroy the hive base, instead of filling up the hole or putting a power plant on it, just ignore it. I don't mean completely ignore it. You want to leave behind a couple of turrets, maybe just a single laser turret that will do it. What will happen is that the base relay will stay there and it's going to try to rebuild the base every so often. When the base gets rebuilt, your turrets will destroy it within seconds of the base being rebuilt. And this will continue for some time. The nice thing about this method is that you don't get any additional hive threat from destroying each base over and over again. Whereas if you were to fill up the hole or put a power plant down, you would get additional hive threat. That means that continuously destroying hive cities, bases on your planet will cause the hive meter to go up and eventually will trigger an attack from the hive just from destroying these over time. Now, after some amount of time that I haven't fully measured, I've noticed that eventually the relay bases that are on top of these holes will disappear, and the fog basically stops contesting that particular spot. Now, I'm not 100% sure about this, but my personal observation is that even if you continue, if at that point you continue to ignore the hole, I suppose, that's on the ground, the AI will not continue to try to expand on that planet. If you do fill it up, if you do put a geothermal power plant on that hole, then it will start to make a new base after a little bit of amount of time. This approach basically makes it so that once you destroy the initial set of bases, you don't have to worry about them at all until you start increasing the hive threat meter. And it's going to be unavoidable to increase the hive threat meter because eventually you're going to want the power of the Dyson sphere or the power of the solar sails. Now, it is possible to just skip the solar sails and go directly to the Dyson sphere if that's what you want. But either way, once you do that, your threat meter is going to start going up with the hive. Once it reaches 100%, it's going to send an attack. I was initially very concerned that Darkfog was going to be as much of a threat as the AI in AI Wars. If you've ever played AI Wars, that AI threat is nothing to sneeze at. You gotta be really ready for it. But it's actually a lot more mellow in Dyson Sphereprogram. I don't mean that you can ignore it by any means. It will absolutely devastate your base if you're not ready for it. But if you're ready for it, it is perfectly manageable. Because even if you're managing your hive threat with the method that I showed earlier, which by the way leaves your threat under 5% pretty much most of the early game, you still can't avoid making the threat meter go up once you start launching the solar sails. At that point, it's going to steadily go up until you'll get to 100%. Once you get to 100%, in my personal case, I was attacked by 5 vessels. That might change depending on the level of the hive and when the attack happened. Maybe it'll be smaller, maybe a little bigger. I'm not sure. But in my case, it was 5 vessels, and they went straight for my main planet, and they started attacking probably the largest hub of buildings that I had. And they use these sort of sweeping ray lasers that will absolutely devastate a large area of your base. The way to defend against this is basically with 3 different items. You're going to need planetary shield generators, missile turrets, and signal towers. Of course, you need secondary items to power these things up, but those are the main ones. The way that the shield generators work, you're going to need a lot of them to cover up your industry. I wouldn't bother covering up anything that's basically empty on your planet, or maybe just has a transport belt or something. Basically, I wouldn't bother with that stuff. But anything that you've built up any industry on, you want to have a generator nearby. The generator will cover a good area, but it's still basically a large circle. You're going to want to build a network of these that cover up most of your industry. I'm going to guess initially you're going to need 8 to 12 of these to cover up most of your industry. Since your threat meter is at 100% or approaching 100% because of your power harvesting activities, it shouldn't be that much of an issue to power up 12 shield generators at this point. Just make sure you have enough power to cover building all of these. You also don't want to build them all at once because they're all going to try to charge by quite a large amount initially. So if you can stagger building the generators maybe 3 at a time or something like that, it'll make it so your shield goes up relatively fast instead of taking forever and having all your power being drained. Since basically the power draw of the shield generators initially is going to be large, just like with the logistical towers, okay? But once they've charged up, their draw will drop, and they're still going to draw power, but it won't be quite as much as when they're doing that initial charge. You're also going to want to have signal towers spread throughout the planet. And finally, you're going to want to build some missile turrets somewhere with a steady ammo supply. If you have the signal towers around, it doesn't matter where the missile turrets are, as long as they're on the planet and they're fed with ammo, they will fire. I personally had around 10 turrets. The 10 turrets took out 5 enemy vessels fast enough that I only lost about 20% of shields. So that means that you probably want more than 10 turrets. I would guess, because 20% seems quite a bit to me. I mean, from 5 vessels, I would imagine if this attack scales up to 10 vessels, I'm not sure if the damage is going to scale linearly as well. So I think it made me a little bit uncomfortable to see that drop, but overall, I mean, it was fine, no problems whatsoever. I think it'll be relatively easy to destroy the towers. And by the way, I was using the tier 1 missiles. If you have upgraded to tier 2 or tier 3, I imagine the damage will be that much better. Anyways, at this point, you might want to go ahead, once you're getting all this set up, you might want to go ahead and just cover up all the relay holes with thermal power plants, since you're probably set up enough to defend yourself from ground attacks as well. At that point, I don't think the planetary bases matter as much as the hive attacks once you kind of switch tracks to this point. But it's up to you, obviously. You can worry about it or not. For me, I wanted the extra power because it just makes it easier to get up to get those shield generators charged. But really, it's kind of up to you. Maybe you built a whole bunch of the power transmitters and you don't need to worry about it. Really, it just depends on your game style and what you've automated at that point and what you haven't. Anyways, those are just some of the initial tidbits that I found while I was playing DSP. If you have your own approach that you like to take, please share it. I would love to know how you do it. And if you like the original game, this is likely going to be an amazing addition for you. I definitely recommend that you give it a try. I hope you all have a great holiday season, and I'll catch you all on the next one.